So this is a tricky one, human capital. You saw Jeffrey Sachs again. He's talking about these ideas. How do I say this? Okay, here's the deal. I would start this over, but I'm not going to. Jeffrey Sachs really is a modernization guy. But once modernization starts happening, he wants to kick in this human capital. So I gave you him not as like this is what we need to do first, but this is sort of what human capital means. You can also see that video by Esther Duflo, who won the Nobel Prize in economics, and they're both sort of on this human capital idea. So let's talk about this. The problem from the human capital standpoint is poor countries lack a productive workforce. And let me be very clear about this. This is not a humanitarian sort of idea. This is not we are improving people's lives because of humanitarian reasons. That is a great side effect of this, and it feels good. But the reason that you're improving the health and the education of the population is so that they can work. And that will then improve the economy, and that will solve the poverty thing. So I don't want you to focus on the humanitarian issue, even though that's definitely a part of this. So what it means is two things: lack of education or skilled labor force. And again, not because we want people to read and be full individuals, it's because you need an education to do certain things in factories. The second is lack of health care. And again, it's not because we want people to be healthy, though that's definitely a great side effect of this. It's because if people are sick, then you not only lose all the, if they die early, that you lose all the training that they have in them already. But if someone is sick, they work less hours, or the hours they work are less productive. A healthy person produces more than an unhealthy person. So then how do you target foreign aid? If you want a healthier workforce and you want a more skilled workforce, it's pretty easy. Number one, you're going to focus on education programs, especially science and technology. None of this humanities crap, poetry, that's not going to get you a healthier or a more educated workforce. You want people who can build computer chips instead of putting together, toilet seats. But you want people who can build toilet seats, which requires understanding how the robots work and all the machines work, rather than people who just work in fields. That's sort of the idea about an increasing skilled labor workforce. The other element, and that's, by the way, that's where science comes into this whole thing, and technology. The other thing you want is to spend money on reduction of diseases. And you saw some things in those videos, or at least the Sachs video about this. Things like water treatment system. Water treatment and sanitation. Again, very simply, if you just have sanitation and clean water, how more productive will your workforce be? And it's a pretty, again, relative to the population, it's a pretty cheap way of spending foreign aid. Another thing is medicines to prevent the spread of disease. One of the things they were talking about was malaria. But again, not just medicines when we're talking about malaria, but also like nets can help spread the disease. A fairly cheap option. Public health education programs. Again, just helping people understand what malaria is, how it's spread, can maybe get more people to use nets. Public health education. Again, this person just is less likely to get sick. One of the things that was talked about in the Esther Duflo was deworming. This goes with both these things. If children are dewormed, they're healthier and they're better educated because they can go to school and things like that. Just really, again, I don't want to say simple things, but things that it doesn't take a lot of money to fix these problems. Which then raises the question, why isn't money being spent on these things? One of the main complaints we're going to get about this, that I don't have on the next page, but one of the main complaints about this system here is if we spend a lot of money on this, it actually takes it takes a long time. For example, let's say we spend a lot of money on education programs. Okay, great. So not only does it take us time to get those education programs into place, but then you have to wait for that generation of students to go all the way through the system before it sort of works. This is where you're actually going to see sort of more feedback on this. The problem is it doesn't feel like a direct connection. All right, so what are some complaints? What are some problems about this? Again, it seems like from a humanitarian standpoint, from those of you guys who love people, this just makes sense. Even if you don't like this whole productive workforce thing, you like this stuff down here. I want kids to be better educated. I want people not to suffer from diseases, to live longer, that kind of stuff. One of the things, by the way, that this book talks about here, this is that Banerjee Duflo book, Poor Economics. It talks about something called micronutrients. Like that, the problem is of poverty is not that people are starving to death. In most cases, in some cases it is. The problem is that they're not getting micronutrients, and so they're not getting all the things that you would like the vitamin C and riboflavin and all that kind of stuff. Is that doesn't become a part of their diet because their diet is so small, and just by sort of providing more micronutrients to the diets that already exist makes people healthier and makes it easier for someone who is poor to get out of poverty. One of the problems with poverty is what we call the poverty trap. By the way, from this perspective, is that let's say that I'm poor. If I'm poor, that also means I can't afford a lot of food. I can't afford the good healthcare. I can't afford good education. I can't afford this or that. And because of that, all the things that would be necessary for me to work my way out of poverty, those opportunities don't exist because of my poverty itself. So poverty sort of creates more poverty, and makes it really hard to get out of it. You have to do some intervention into this to allow somebody to sort of jump out of that, like these sorts of things here, and then maybe poverty can be ended. All right, what are the problems? There's a few problems. Number one, let's start with the problems that the modernization people would have with human capital, and that is, let's say that I have this. Let's say that I've improved the health and the education of the workforce, but we haven't focused on industry. Again, if I'm in the modernization camp like Sachs, I like the human capital idea, but what happens if I do this and don't do this? It's useless. It's smart. You have a bunch of smart and healthy people with nothing to do. That doesn't solve the poverty problem. The other side of this is actually, if you have human capital improved but no industry, it's actually very dangerous. Is that those people will then get restless. They expect to have work and there is no work, and they'll demand change. And so what we see is that where you have this sort of growing, a growing education system, or I should say better education, better healthcare, but no industry, these are the places where we see higher incidence of revolution, protests, places where we see higher incidence of crime, places where we see higher incidence of terrorism, actually, because there's an expectation that this is what I should have, but it's not there anymore. And now you have people who can do something about it. The very, very poor tend not to do those things because the very, very poor don't have really the expectation that things should be much, much better than this. This also, by the way, tends to look like neocolonialism, where essentially we're coming in, I say the West is coming in and saying, here, this is what good education is. All that education you're getting in your madrasa or that education you're getting from, the tribe, that sucks. You want science, you want technology. That's the only really good thing. And by that I mean Western science, Western technology, so that you can now go work in Western corporations for Western consumers. That just feels very neo-colonial. Maybe not as bad as the last one, but it does tend to look like that. There's also this loss of local cultural knowledge, or local knowledge, cultural knowledge, because again, the focus is on getting yourself into this global economy, not necessarily on doing the things that your place is best at. One more thing, and this, don't worry about that. Another thing that sort of goes with this is what we call a disjunction of motives. And this is kind of what I started off talking about. The people who support this are people who want a more productive workforce. But my guess is that you guys sitting in your seats, some of you guys will think that's a good idea. Most of you guys, if you like this idea, you like this not because of the productive workforce, but just because you think that's better for human beings, like the human rights angle on this. The supporters of this tend to focus on humanitarian motives, like you guys. You like that idea of this. But donors, like the World Bank and things like that, they're less concerned with the humanitarian angle, though they're not unconcerned with it. They're more concerned about the economic motives. Does this lead to a better economy? Not does this lead to healthier, happier people? And this can tend to create some problems in terms of how do we know the program is successful? These guys are measuring it different than these guys. All right, so you got two so far. You've got the modernization. The problem is a lack of industry. You've got this one, human capital. The problem is a unhealthy, uneducated workforce. So we have two more to go here. So take a look at William Easterly.